So welcome to this video interview in the framework of the INCrEAsE project. It is an interview we are doing on Zoom, and in the last few weeks everybody is expert with Zoom because of the COVID, which forced us to better evaluate what we already had right under our nose, which is the possibility, for example, to talk each other and to have those interviews online, which is not the same, which has not the same effect of an on-site interview, but we can take advantage from this situation. This interview
as close as it gets.
is realized in the framework of the European project entitled After Intercultural Competencies for Adult Educator, with the acronym of INCrEAsE. The project is funded by the European Commission in the framework of the Erasmus Plus program, Strategic Partnership for Adult Education. The project aims to develop intercultural communication of adult educators working in formal and non-formal educational settings in order to help them to overcome the challenges arising from their everyday work with multicultural and multilingual learners population. So the focus is addressed to adult educators. One of them decided to be the sacrificial victim of this interview. She's Manca, and I will immediately leave the floor to Manca to present herself. And before starting officially the interview, I would like to thank her for this involvement in the interview. Please, Manca.
Thank you very much, Antonio. Let me just first correct you, because I'm Manca in Slovenian, but it's okay. I'm used to it.
I was pretty sure about that. So I had 50% possibility to make it right or to make it wrong, yeah. And I got wrong. So.
But don't worry, I'm usually Manca in a foreign setting, so I'm used to it. Thank you for invitation, and yeah, I would just like to present myself shortly. I'm Manca. I come from Slovenia and from an organization called Humanitas, Center for Global Education and Learning. And my path, well, let's say my career path, although I'm not fond of talking about careers and stuff, more as a calling, let's say, life calling, started already at the Institute for Ethnic Studies, where I really found my passion. You know, this is talking and researching about human rights, about nationalism, about xenophobia, about how to deal with prejudice and stereotypes which are full, you know, in society, and of course also within ourselves, because we know that every one of us has prejudice. And well, this career path led me then to the most interesting position that I had so far. That was at the at the Ombudsman for Human Rights. That's a state, let's say, state institution, independent one. And there I got a possibility to see also how the state functions, you know, how the state mechanisms for non-discrimination and for human rights function, how the state prepares the defense, how the shadow reports function, you know, for all these international legal mechanisms and covenants and declaration, etc. But I must say I was quite disappointed, because I could see that although I had a few experiences also dealing with adult education, for example, we had lots of training with police officers, with prosecutors, with judges. I was mainly in charge for developing modules for education based on this interactive module, the interactive methods, you know, how to deal with prejudice, how to deal with stereotypes, how to also involve this emotional component, not only the rational one, because if we just discuss prejudice, then we will never agree on anything. We have to also feel it, you know, on our own skin. But as I could see, we didn't have quite this reach that I wished, you know, because they still saw us as a very formal institution, you know. So then I think it was around 6 years later, I decided to go more into the non-governmental sector, where I could also get in touch with a lot of non-formal education procedures and methods and stuff. So I think now it's already 10 years since I've been in non-governmental sector. And at Humanitas, I'm dealing mostly with training for teachers, for example. We have a very nice initiative that maybe I can talk about a little bit. It's the Club of Global Education Teachers. We involve now already more than 60 teachers from all over Slovenia that are meeting on bi-monthly basis, that are getting our methods on how to approach their pupils, for example, on different topics. So it's also intercultural dialogue, anti-discrimination, climate change, well, lots of different topics. So let's say mostly my current occupation is mostly this preparation of all the different modules. And as you said, this COVID situation, Corona situation also, let's say, pushed us into developing more interactive modules online, because we were experts in dealing with face-to-face modules, but now we had to adapt, let's say. So in recent months, we had lots of modules online as well. And I can tell you, like you said in the beginning, that there's no replacement for the face-to-face contact. So I'm not a fan of online modules, I can tell you that, yeah. So that was just a, I don't know, short introduction maybe.
Thanks for this introduction. And the coronavirus also obliged us, for a lot of us, to work from home. And you just noticed my daughter who is around. So
I know that all too well.
Yeah. About the questions, a question that I just had listening to your experience, which is quite huge. Which is working better with multicultural context, the formal or non-formal education?
It depends on what you wish as a result to be, but I think I had good experiences in both, in formal and in non-formal education. Maybe I can say that non-formal education in terms of more relaxed environment is a bit better, especially because these topics are very sensitive and you have to have this trust first. And in non-formal education, maybe you have more time to build this trust, you know, because in the formal education, we are very limited. We have contact with teachers. They say, okay, this and this day you can come and you can have this workshop with pupils. And that's it, you know, it's very little chances of this continuous work. Whereas non-formal education, maybe we have more opportunities to build this trust, to form a group, than to talk more deeply into the sensitive subjects such as prejudice or xenophobia or nationalisms. So, yeah, I think maybe, yeah, non-formal education would be my favorite.
And again, moving from the fixed questions that I provided you with, but I think it's better to follow the, you know, the moods of the interview. And you have been speaking about the reasons behind your decision to stay and to work in this context. And you mentioned the stereotypes that everybody has. So intercultural communication, starting from the negative aspects, why we are doing and you are doing this kind of intercultural communication. On the other side, if you have to choose some keywords to define what is intercultural communication, what would be your choice about these keywords?
Keywords. For sure, diversity, respect for diversity, tolerance. Although I'm not that fond of the word tolerance per se, but you know, I would maybe change it with the word coexistence, because tolerance also involves this very negative attributes, like I have to tolerate you, you know, I have to accept you for who you are. But coexistence goes a little bit further. It means to tolerate as well as to start to know one another and to live together. That's, for example, some languages have this this verb which we don't have, for example, in Slovenian language, but it's to live together. That's a very, very wonderful word, because it doesn't mean only to have various groups coexisting, but also how to intertwine them, how to start living together, how to learn from one another, how to how to make these experiences of coexistence. Yeah, I think I was too philosophical now, but
it is coexistence because people stay together. The most important thing is to avoid people in the same country living in their little reality, because it is good to have this exchange. And about exchange, what would be your, if you can mention some problems that you faced during your experience, or on the other hand, some successful experiences?
Okay. For sure, one of the most successful ones dealing with intercultural dialogue, as well as trying to convey this experience to others, would be this process of co-creation that we had when we tried to form the theater play. And it was in a co-creation process, which means that we first formed friendships with a couple of people who were having this refugee experience or migration experience. And through this bond that was created, we also said, okay, what should we do now to try to convey these experiences that you had to others? So it was a really co-creation process, and I think this is also the basis of all the intercultural dialogue, that also when we talk about others, we should include them. So it's not the saying goes for the people with disabilities, for example, nothing for us without us. And I think this should be exactly the paradigm also in the intercultural dialogue. So if we want to have this dialogue, then we need to include everyone into the dialogue, not have the dialogue without one group, for example. Yeah, so this would be one really good experience that I had. Well, as far as the negative experience goes, maybe that's the problem with all these activities that we have with awareness raising, let's say, because we're always preaching to the converted ones, let's say. So it's also about how to include the ones that are very negative towards one group, let's say, how to reach the racists or that's the biggest problem. So we're always having this dilemma of whether this progress is really a progress if we're only preaching to the ones who agree with us.
Maybe I totally agree with you about the word tolerance, which means you have to tolerate anyone else. Dialogue, I think, is the key word, because again, if we are not forced to live together, because some people live or they think living with other people like something we have to because we are obliged, but it is something which is part of our history, which is part of what we are, of what we do, and of the natural migrations that people may have. So the dialogue between different realities is I think is the key to the success.
The keyword, yes.
The keyword, yeah. And final question, going back to your experience, if we have, a kind of mirror with magical effects, you can see yourself before starting this career. What would be the suggestion that you would give to yourself to convince that this is the path, this is the right direction about working in multiculturalism?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Because of course there are pros and cons and many frustrations in this line of work. But I think what I would say to myself is I would tell the story of one girl that approached me when we had this theater show, and she said, you know, I came to this theater show twice already, and this time I brought my mother, who was very against refugees, you know, because the theater show, I should explain, the theater show was about the refugee trail and experiences that refugees had on this Balkan trail. So the girl said, okay, and I brought my mother, who was very against it. You could also say that she was very racist. And what convinced her, because she was meeting the refugees for the first time, our friends, you know, from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Iran, she met people with refugee experience for the first time in her life. And after that, she went to asylum home and volunteered there, you know. So this was one of the examples of what this work can do. And even if you persuade, let's say persuade, I don't know if this is the right word, but if you can persuade only one member of our society to change his or her mind, then you are already successful. And if you change more, then even better. So,
because every time you convince one, something which we should take into account is the domino effect. Because
exactly.
you know, the word of mouth, speaking about your experience can change. Because the cultural change are the most difficult ones. You can move, you can change your house, you can do whatever, but change what is in your mind is the most difficult experience that you can have. And exactly. Thanks to people like you, to what you do, maybe we can just prepare the future to something again which is better, something which is more shared among people. It's really strange. We are speaking right now. Today it is the 8th of June, and on the other side, we just heard about what is happening in USA, and you know, something that we thought it was already the past, but it is just something that we as European and white race, we just didn't want to see the reality. And the reality is also made of those really bad example of racism. And again, thanks to the activity of people like you, we can just wait and hope for the best in the coming future. Thanks again for your involvement in this interview, which was quite tricky because of some external noises. And thanks again for your involvement.
You're very welcome, and thank you also.